When I'm alone at night. When you're alone at night.
It's Digital Wavelengths on the Wave 102.5.
The Wave, 102.5 with Michael Franks from part one of our features CD tonight, the CD Passionfruit. Tonight's Passionfruit from 1983 on Digital Wavelengths from The Wave, 102.5.
It's Digital Wavelengths on the Wave 102.5.
The Wave, 102.5 with Michael Franks, How the Garden Grows from part two of tonight's feature CD on Digital Wavelengths, the 1983 release, Passionfruit from Michael Franks. Also in part two, When Sly Calls. Tell me all about it. Rainy night in Tokyo, and we began with Never Say Die. Don't forget, Michael will be in concert Saturday night with Doug Cameron and the Yellow Jackets, also on the bill at Sanibel's Jazz on the Green at the Dunes Country Club on Sanibel Island. On Sunday, the Chick Corea Band on the lineup. A great event. If you need to know more about tickets, call us here at The Wave, 102.5.
Belinda Womack and Cool Reflections continue the spicy success story of the Reeves Import Motorcars Friday night Ybor Jazz Stroll this Friday. Tampa's hottest cool spot for outdoor jazz with a sociable beat. 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. in Ybor City Centennial.
Some fun.
Van Morrison with Bein' Green right there from the Hard Nosed the Highway LP. Before that, Mose Allison gave us Middle Class White Boy from his album of the same name. Paul Wilborn, a local and well-known white boy, columnist for the Tampa Tribune and leader of Paul Wilborn and the Pop-Tarts from their locally produced and recorded cassette Livin' in FLA. We heard Paul Wilborn doing White Boy, and James Taylor brought us out of the news with Steamroller from his greatest hits LP. 8:17 the time. You're tuned to the morning show. Cameron Dillian with you on a Friday morning. Michael Beattie will be back at 8:30 with the Friday morning film notes, and then at 8:45 with the morning show news. Abortion rights in Canada may be coming in for some restrictions. And in Florida, the issue may cost the governor his job, according to a new survey. Meanwhile, in overseas news, Israel has carried out a raid and kidnapping in Lebanon, and in Iran, voters are going to the polls today. At home, President Bush's defense budget is in trouble, and Greenpeace has planned a protest against the Trident II. Those stories and more will be coming up at 8:45 on the WMNF Morning Show News. Back to music now with Tanita Tikaram from her debut LP Ancient Heart and Twist in My Sobriety. Jesse Winchester from the Learn to Love It album, one of his early Bearsville Records releases. That was Defying Gravity. Before that, some more Van Morrison by request, one from the new release. We heard from him off an earlier album just before that, but there, one from his brand new CD, Avalon Sunset, When Will I Ever Learn? Van Morrison. And Tanita Tikaram from England, her debut release, the 19-year-old English singer, Ancient Heart, and Twist in My Sobriety is what started that out. Right now, a sober look at film in the area. Michael Beattie returns to us here at 8:30 with the Friday morning film notes, and then we'll be back with more music right the other side of this. Theme music. Suzanne Vega by request, concluding a set about emotional women. Small Blue Thing right there from Suzanne Vega's debut release, a self-titled LP. She's come out with one since then. Randy Newman gave us Real Emotional Girl from his Trouble in Paradise LP, and almost by request, Bonnie Raitt and I Ain't Blue started that set. Right now, it's, we're going to get you on early this morning, Michael. Michael Beattie is in with the 8:45 edition of the Morning Show News at 8:44.
But I don't know if I can do that. Supposing people just tune in for just think of that, Cam. Suppose someone's out there watching their watch.
We'll have to stretch.
We have to do happy talk.
Say.
Happy, rhubarb, mutter, 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 mutter. Well, do you think it's going to snow today?
You know, I understand there's a 50% chance of precipitation, but I don't know if snow's a possibility. You'd have to be up pretty high in the atmosphere.
Do you think if one day I went on and completely seriously read a blizzard warning, people would believe it?
No, not down here. Not anybody that wasn't living in air conditioning at any rate. Well, I see the phones are ringing, and we've just about killed time, so go ahead.
Fine. Good morning. You're listening to WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota at 88.5 FM Community Radio, and this is the second edition of the Morning News. I'm Michael Beattie. President Bush's defense priorities are now in the hands of the Senate. The House last night passed a $295 billion Pentagon spending bill that's a far cry from what Bush wanted to see. Lawmakers voted to slash funds for many of Bush's favored defense programs, including Star Wars, the MX missile, and the costly B-2 stealth bomber. They also wiped out funding for the Midget Man missile. A House-Senate negotiating committee last night turned out a compromise measure intended to rescue the ailing savings and loan industry. The landmark legislation carries an estimated $166 billion price tag, most of it to be paid by American taxpayers. The compromise bill ignores President Bush's desire to keep the S&L bailout cost out of the federal budget deficit. Felix Bloch, the senior U.S. diplomat suspected of spying, has reportedly acknowledged working for the Soviets for many years. The New York Times quotes an unidentified official as saying Bloch told the FBI he received a lot of money for working with the Soviet intelligence agency. A pro-Iranian Lebanese Shiite leader kidnapped by Israeli forces reportedly is linked to last year's abduction of an American Marine. Lebanese security forces say U.S. Lieutenant Colonel William Higgins was briefly held in the apartment of Sheikh Abdul Harim Obeid. Police say a dozen Israeli commandos kidnapped Obeid from his home in southern Lebanon early today. Reports from Beirut say dueling Syrian and Christian gunners today fired about 50,000 shells and rockets on the city as they fought. Lebanese police say 9 people were killed and 42 were wounded during the 8-hour battle. They call it the heaviest shelling in a 4-month standoff. Libyan authorities say the pilot of the Korean Air DC-10 that crashed in Libya has said he was probably wrong in trying to land at Tripoli's fog-covered airport. Officials say more than 70 people died when the DC-10 crashed short of the runway. Exxon executives are being asked to spell out whether they have plans to continue cleaning up the Alaska oil spill next year. Concerns over Exxon's plans arose this week after an internal company memo implied that Exxon won't commit itself to further cleanup efforts next spring. Exxon and Coast Guard officials are scheduled to testify today before a House Interior panel. A report by the National Research Council says the legacy of discrimination against blacks in the U.S. continues. The group says despite large economic gains made by black Americans over the past 50 years, their progress compared to whites has stagnated or worsened since the early 1970s. The report says the economic slowdown of that period hurt Americans generally, but particularly those with the least skills and lowest incomes. Federal scientists are expressing hope that they may have found a powerful weapon for fighting AIDS. A report published in the journal Science says early tests of a new drug called DDI have shown it is capable of controlling the growth of the AIDS virus, while helping AIDS patients gain weight, feel better, and develop some resistance to infection. A top researcher warns that DDI isn't a cure, but rather a tool to help control the disease. Scientists say it's possible the drug could be widely available sometime next year. A new medical study indicates hospital workers aren't doing enough to protect themselves against the AIDS virus. A study by Baltimore's Johns Hopkins Hospital says health workers fail to take adequate measures, such as wearing gloves, masks, and gowns. Some 66% of the time during the 6-week study, the same study found 1 in 16 emergency room patients to be infected with the AIDS virus. The case of a 21-year-old Quebecois woman may be putting abortion rights in jeopardy in Canada. A Quebec appeals court has ruled by 3-2 against allowing her to have the procedure, saying the abortion would violate the rights of the fetus under Quebec's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The court has also ruled that mother and father share the right to choose whether or not to have an abortion. Freelance journalist John Tuckerberry is based in Ontario.
As it stands now, it's hinged to an interpretation of the Quebec Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which applies in the province of Quebec. It means that the ability of a woman to get an abortion in Quebec now is prejudiced by the interpretation put on the availability and access to abortion in that province. It's not clear from the interpretation of the judgment whether previous boyfriends, husbands, or third parties can intervene and prevent an abortion to protect the fetus. But the demonstration effect of this action on the part of the Court of Appeal is that it could be used as a precedent. Certainly the definition of the absolute right of a woman to an abortion being circumscribed by the court could be used as a precedent and has been a basis for some representations have been made in different courts across the country. For the first time in Canada this summer, we have had separate injunctions filed in the provinces of Manitoba and Ontario based upon the rights of the father to intervene to protect a fetus that the former, in 2 cases, the former lover or former companion has decided to have an abortion.
John Tuckerberry in Ontario. Meanwhile, in Florida, the abortion issue could cost Governor Bob Martinez his job. A poll of Florida voters telephoned over the weekend says that may be the case later next year. The Mason-Dixon survey published today shows 55% give Martinez negative marks. It also shows that pro-choice voters represent 30% of the electorate. That's enough to sweep Martinez from office in 1990. Some 61% of voters polled said the decision to have an abortion should be left entirely up to the woman and her doctor. 34% disagreed and 5% were unsure. Some state legislators say Floridians who want to restrict abortion rights should support higher taxes to pay for the needy. Republican Senator Bob Johnson of Sarasota wants to raise about $960 million in new property taxes to support a network of health care and welfare programs for poor mothers and their infants. He's filed legislation to allow voters to decide on the tax increase through a constitutional amendment. The owner of a typical $75,000 home would pay about $150 a year more in taxes if the amendment were adopted. In Tampa last night, over 400 women turned out to show their support for choice in abortion rights. They formed the nucleus of the new Tampa chapter of the National Organization for Women, being reformed after a year-long hiatus.
Private matter. It's nobody's business but a woman what she does with her body.
I'm here because I have 2 daughters and I want them to have a choice.
I believe that women have the choice to make up their own minds. It's our bodies.
The meeting last night was supervised by colleagues from the well-established Upper Pinellas chapter. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, State Representative Doug Jameson appears to have been swayed by the grassroots opposition to change. He announced yesterday he will oppose any state changes in abortion laws. In Tampa, the City Council has agreed to set a date for a public hearing on the renaming of Buffalo Avenue to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Some businesses opposed the change and told the council yesterday they will not honor it if it comes about. Council member Joe Greco insists the debate over the change is not a sign of disrespect for King.
The one thing that I've heard this council go on record as unanimously agreeing to is that we needed to find a way to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't think that's ever been an issue with a council as far as a unanimous agreement.
A public hearing may be set in cooperation with the county and state officials. Meanwhile, the Hillsborough County Commission has overridden its staff recommendations and decided to award a landfill contract to the incumbent. WMNF's Steve Allison has a report.
In a split vote Wednesday, the Hillsborough County Commission awarded a 10-year contract to Waste Management Incorporated of Florida to operate the county's southeast landfill. Waste Management's $66.5 million bid was the only one received by the county. In tentatively awarding the contract, the county's rules requiring the use of minority contractors were temporarily set aside. Two commissioners, Jan Platt and Pam Iorio, voted against the Waste Management bid. Platt objects to the lack of competition in the process.
17 bidders initially expressed an interest. The contract will be well over $50 million in value, and our staff had originally recommended that we reject that bid and start the bidding process over. I'm concerned when the county awards a bid of that nature and that size under a circumstance where only one bidder submits a bid.
Waste Management is a firm presently operating in Hillsborough County. And according to Platt, they were awarded contracts last year for various waste disposal activities. Those contracts were also given without competing bids. As a firm with considerable experience in Hillsborough County, Platt feels they should have been better prepared to comply with the county's rules on minority contracting. However, the board chose to temporarily waive those rules.
The board's rationale was to give Waste Management more time so that they could, in fact, meet those requirements. I objected to that because Waste Management operates in this county and has for a number of years. And in my opinion, there's no excuse for them not to have known what those requirements were, and there's no excuse for them not having included those in their bid.
Waste Management will have to come back before the board in the near future to demonstrate their compliance with the minority contracting rules and to present final dollar figures. No date has been set for that presentation. For WMNF, this is Steve Allison.
The environmental group Greenpeace says the Navy plans to launch a Trident II ballistic missile from a submarine today. The Navy won't confirm or deny the test, but it does say it's aware of a planned protest by Greenpeace. Activists say they'll send 2 boats into the test zone, which is in international waters off Cape Canaveral. They say the missile will be fired from the USS Tennessee, which is out of Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base in St. Mary's, Georgia. It would be the second test launch of a $40 million Trident II missile. In the first test last March, the missile spun out of control and self-destructed after 4 seconds. The forecast today is similar to that of yesterday and doubtless that of tomorrow. It's going to be partly cloudy, sunny, chance of thunder showers this afternoon. Winds on the Gulf will be southeasterly to 10 knots, seas to 3 feet. Water temperatures 87 degrees. That's it for the second edition of the Morning News. Riders Radio Theatre will come to you for the last time at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. Next week it'll move, or next month I should say, it'll move over to a Monday evening slot. After that we'll have Art in Your Ear with Cam.
Saturday night at Sanibel's Jazz on the Green at the Dunes Country Club, we present the music of Michael Franks, his 1983 release and his 7th album called Passionfruit, produced by Franks on digital wavelengths from the Wave, 102.5.